am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs. And this is our 2020 wrap-up. So I'm going to review our guests from the last quarter of 2020 and some of the big themes that came out of those interviews, as well as give you my own message for the year and going into 2021 so that you can kind of reset yourself as well and maybe review the year, understand where you've been, understand what you've been through, and also think about what the opportunities are for 2021. There were definitely some main themes of these interviews, and I think they're so relevant to the times that we are in. And one of them is really about sacrifice and uncertainty. And there's never been a time that there has been more sacrifice and uncertainty in our lives, most likely, because there's really nothing we can predict. There are things that we may understand better than we did in the beginning of this pandemic, but the one thing we do know is there is a lot of uncertainty and we have sacrificed a lot. And in this sense, when you take it from an entrepreneur standpoint, many of us sacrifice in order to get through the hard stuff. And one of the interviews that I had with Paul Peterson this quarter from WIS was all about going through the hard stuff and how we have to withstand the pain when we're in it. And I do believe, and through my own life experiences, there's no factual research to this at all, just more life experience, that some of us are born to withstand more emotional pain than others. And some of us, it's a really hard space to be in. Not that it's not hard for everybody, but I do believe some of us are born with this natural way to know what to do when things are hard. And I think for all of us, we've learned how important mental health is in the situations we've been in and what we have to do to take care of ourselves. And some of the things Paul talked about in just the evolution of his accounting firm and change in leadership and so forth was that you can't control an outcome, but you do need to understand what you believe in and what is that belief system that you're working around as you go through hard things. And I think the other really important thing to think about that he brought up is when they were going through some hard changes in the firm and more just which way it was going to go, for the group of people that were pushing for change for the future, they went through an exercise to really understand what's the worst outcome that could happen if we were to move forward the way that we are, or that it doesn't happen. And can we withstand the pain of that risk? And I think it's important that we do put those things on paper, because a lot of times we spin in our head and we think about all these things that could go wrong, but not necessarily thinking about, is it so bad if it does go wrong? And is it worth what we're going through, the sacrifice that we're going through, that uncertainty, in order to get through this very hard thing? And if the worst case scenario is bearable, then the risk might be worth it in the end. And it's important to write those things down so that we understand why we're doing what we're doing and not have fear of the unknown. when we actually can rationalize these risk factors during uncertain times, then we know that we can withstand the pain as we're going through it. And the thing about pain that's important is to realize that every person we're around has their own human reaction going on internally. We may not know what that is, or they're not readily sharing what's going on inside of them, but everybody has it happening, whether they say it or don't say it. And so when we get to that place of humanness, then what we can allow ourselves to feel is that we're not alone in the process. And we do sometimes have to take a leap of faith with people that might not seem that they're going through things, but they just might not be an open person and want to be that transparent. But from a human perspective, no one is bulletproof. And everyone has things that are going on internally for them and has their own fears. When we can get to that point where we're all human, then we can come to a place when we're going through hard things, maybe with other people, like Paul was talking about in changing the leadership at the accounting firm, or hard circumstances, that we know that we're all in this together. We might have opposing views, we might have differences of opinion, but there's a basis to being human. And when we can connect to that human place, then it allows us to start moving forward and seeing people as people, and that each person is walking through their own stories. And so, when we're going through hard times, that sacrifice and uncertainty during those times makes it worth it if we understand the outcome that we're trying to achieve. And really, what that comes down to is our passion and purpose. So, if we know why we believe in what we do, then when we're going through hard times, if we can keep our mind on why we're doing what we're doing and why this is hard right now, then it actually makes the hard times a little bit easier, because we can shift our mindset to focus on something else. And we definitely had a number of interviews focus on those same things. I interviewed Brian Fox, who also talked about the beginnings of confirmation.com and how hard those times were in the beginning, where there was very little cash flow coming in and they were really working month to month. But coming back to that place of passion and purpose really helped him and the people around him understand why they were sacrificing what they were sacrificing and living in uncertainty. And that's the thing, whether a pandemic or not, when we're a leader in a business, when we're an entrepreneur, we live in times of uncertainty all the time. There is a difference, and I believe, definitely with a number of these entrepreneurs that I had interviews with during this last quarter, that belief in yourself is so important. And we can all learn from that, no matter if you're an entrepreneur or just trying to get through the day and, bring things together for yourself and your family. Is when we believe in ourselves and that we can accomplish what's ahead of us. Now, it may seem insurmountable, but there's something that we have to believe in that we can't put numbers around, we can't put data around. It's just gut and intuition that we are actually going to persevere, that we are going to make it past this point. And Brian really talked about that, of how important it is in times of uncertainty to have a belief in what you're doing and a purpose. Now, many times we don't spend enough time really analyzing for ourselves what is our belief systems and what is our purpose. And that's really why I have this podcast, right? So we can learn from all these other people's stories of how they really develop their own belief system, their purpose, their passion, and what really drove that over time to inspire you as well to think about it. Often we wait for the business to tell us to set goals, or they're very focused on the business goals, but we don't often step back and look at what is our purpose. Who do we serve and why? And what is the outcome that we want to create from the work that we do or for our interactions with other people? What do we want people to walk away from us feeling? And what is that experience that they should have? And this is really important because what this does is help us make all of our decisions as we go forward. So when we're in times of uncertainty or that we have to make hard decisions in our career or our business, if we're able to align that back with our passion and our personal purpose, then what happens is that we know that we are actually on the right track because it does align with that. If something doesn't align with our passion and our personal purpose, we feel it in our gut. And so it's up to us to listen to it, to observe it, and not fight that. And so sometimes we have to make the hard decisions because it just doesn't feel right. We might not have proof of why it doesn't feel right, but it's something that we need to listen to in our bodies because that is telling us, as part of nature, of being an animal, of why we exist, our existedness. And it's important that we take time to observe that and to not fight it. And if we're not clear on it, to give ourselves space to be clear on that as well. Because we could rush around or try to make rational decisions. But if we don't give ourselves space, and especially when we're going through hard times, we can't really observe what's working for us and what's not working for us and what we might want to do different as we move forward. Now, another key theme with all of this is really about perseverance and withstanding the pain. And so with that, I talked to Enrico Palmerino from BotKeeper as well about his entrepreneurial journey and really things that he had to learn over time in multiple businesses that he's grown to be successful. But at the time that you start a business, you don't necessarily know that. And one of his first businesses, he actually started in college as a college student. And so, really important to realize that when we go through our business journey or our career journey, it's not necessarily how long we've been around, it's how much we trust ourselves to achieve what we put out there. And he really talked about some key areas to remember as we're going through our leadership careers or running a business. Is number one, to not make assumptions. And I think a lot of times we make assumptions, whether that's about people, whether that's about the circumstances that we're in or the state of our business or so forth, instead of being really open and instead asking a lot of questions from everybody and to learn. And so when we open up our mindset to learning rather than making assumptions, we might get more data or information that's going to gear us in another direction than we originally thought. So it's important to stay independent from the work that we do so that we can still observe it and look at it as its own living, breathing thing versus a part of us and making emotional decisions instead of doing what's right for the business, even if it's something that we might not enjoy, but it's the right thing for that business to keep going. The other thing that he talked about is how important it is to listen to your customers and that their feedback should always be first because it actually feeds into what your future plans are to make sure that you're serving your customer in the way that you want and that you build great advisors around you. Really important that you don't think you're the smartest person in the room. So I think with all of our guests this last quarter, they've all talked about how important it was to create a community and make sure that they were open to all of the information that they were receiving from the people around them, that they were making the right decisions and for the things that they haven't learned yet or the things that they haven't done before, to really draw in advisors or mentors that can help with giving you that information that you have no experience in. Brian talked about how important it was for him to have mentors as well. In another interview I had with Adam Clater from Red Hat, he also talked about how important it was for him to take on mentors and advisors along the way, that his story was really all about learning. And that was a key theme for all of these interviews about learning and taking on opportunities, is that to not close yourself off from getting the experience, the advice that you need, that in order to help with your career or in your leadership as well. So Adam's path was very unique as far as he didn't go to college and he's had great success in the corporate world. But it was during that path to his current job is where the learning happened. And that was a key thing for him to understand, was being open to all the opportunity around him and really working hard for every person that he worked with. So we can't ever take anything for granted and take people for granted around us and not realize how important those people could be either today or in the future. And typically, and I can even say in my career as well, that the people that you become closest with as a leader are the ones that you feel have skin in the game just like you, that care just like you. And for most leaders, it can feel very lonely because they've got this vision that they have to execute and get everyone around that vision. But the problem is, if the people around them don't believe in that vision the same or aren't as passionate with the same value system or purpose, then you can't achieve that vision, because it can't just be one person. It takes the community, it takes the people around you. And all of the interviews that I had over the course of this corner talked about how important it is to really mentor your people, give your people the opportunities that they need, and provide the learning paths that they need as well. But all of them themselves attribute their success to really volunteering for everything and saying yes. When opportunities come your way, rather than over assessing it, and I talk to people that I consult and coach with about this all the time, is really what ends up getting in our way is a lot of times our own excuses and blame for the outside. But when we do that, we're really deceiving ourselves, because we're doing it in order, because it's something that we probably don't want to do. So it's better to blame the outside or blame someone else versus taking a step back and understanding what is our fear, what's our barrier getting in our way, and try to understand that before we reject the opportunity. I know for myself, if I hadn't said yes to opportunities that at first maybe didn't even seem that great, but I knew in the long run it was the best place for me to go and get experience for my longer term vision, then sometimes you're doing things that maybe you don't enjoy, that it wasn't the best thing you ever did or the most exciting thing you ever did, but you know you couldn't be where you are today without that experience or without those people that gave you the experience and the learning and opportunity as well. So rather than being closed off, I think, during these times when things are uncertain and moving forward, it's important that we keep our eyes open for opportunity, because they're at the same time as things are changing. We've probably never had a time of more opportunity and learning and innovation, because people's eyes are open and they're looking for survival. And when people look for survival, they start being inquisitive, they start being innovative, they start researching, they start looking for the things outside of our everyday normal. And to me, that's the gift of what we've been given during this year, is that whatever normal was in the past will probably never look the same again as we move forward. And for some people, that can definitely be scary, I think for all of us, there's the normal amount of fear with that. But at the same time, we can find opportunity and gratitude for the things that we have. So, I leave this year with a lot of hard things that have happened in my own life and could not have predicted, just like anybody else that was dealing with things happening in their life during the pandemic, of what was going to happen this year. And so during those darkest times, during where we were quarantined and some of you are still quarantined, but not knowing when those times were going to be over, it was really important to observe and breathe and just stay steady. Because the problem is, if we start grabbing at things, then what happens is we get more stressed out than less stressed out. So this year really brought for me, I recently have gotten divorced during the pandemic. Both of my businesses were affected by the changes, not necessarily in a great way originally, but I'm starting to see opportunity and changes because of staying steady during this time and persevering and understanding the importance of the people around me as well. That the support systems that maybe I was always aware of, but in times of need and so forth, that really came through that you couldn't have even imagined when this year began, because that wasn't readily apparent. And I know, as myself, I had always been traveling. I've probably, for the last 15 years, been traveling, 30 or more weeks a year for either business work or speaking and so forth. So this has been the longest time I've ever been home, that I have gone through so many changes in my personal life. And what I've really found are the moments and the things maybe that I didn't notice as acutely, that I have so much gratitude for now. I look at, before, where if I wasn't traveling every week, that, being stagnant was maybe hard. And when going through a hard time like a divorce, that maybe traveling would have been an escape. And instead, what life brought me was to stay home and to stay steady and to be alone in many times when during this quarantine. And also with the shift in my businesses and having to move forward and keep changing the businesses over and over again to survive, during this time, that I've also noticed how much I appreciate this new life as well. So I don't know, and no one can ever know, but when we look back at this year and maybe the experiences that you've had as well, if I would have come to the same conclusions or developed certain friendships and support if I was still on the road like I usually am, or opportunities that have happened in my business because I've been able to be more steady in the things that we do once we started shifting as well. And the appreciation I've always had for the teams around me, but in when things are bad, you never understand who is really real in your life until sometimes the worst of times. And the gratitude that I have for those people, that whether they work for me or friends of mine, is just huge. And so I'm telling you this story and this message to really take stock in what's good. Because a lot of times this year, what I've heard is, it's 2020 and this is the way 2020 is. And because of 2020, all these bad things happen. And I really stepped back and thought about things. And I'm like, really, I'm not sure. I mean, so we're not used to a pandemic, obviously. But is it true that these things don't happen? Death happens, divorce, businesses fail, all sorts of things happen in everyday life, but we might not be slowing down enough to observe it and to sit in it. Because a lot of times we can keep with the pace of life and ignore what's happening bad around us and keep moving forward. But I think the opportunity in all of this is that we understand the importance of being steady and pausing and getting still and observing the things that are going in our life. And when it's hard and emotional, feeling that instead of trying to run away from it. Because when we feel it, it opens up the opportunities of innovation. And what I've seen with my consulting clients and friends and people that I've supported, as well as I've seen so many great ideas and opportunities come out of this time because we're sitting in it. And we're also looking for survival. So rather than running away from the pain, I think it's time to just acknowledge it and not be mad about it, but acknowledge it. And if we feel some anger, acknowledge that we have anger over it, but then think about what are all the great things that have happened as well? And what gratitude can we put to the experiences that we've had this year? And maybe those were the right things to happen in our lives at this moment so that we could move forward in new ways in the coming year. So rather than regret, I just leave you with the message of really sitting in the discomfort if you need to, maybe taking a meditation, maybe just observing what you need to observe, but also maybe journaling or writing down or making a list of what are the observations that you've had that are surprising, that they're the little things, maybe not big things, or the opportunities that you see in the coming year based on what you know now that you could really go after in the next year. And to also take the time to make sure that you really understand your personal purpose in what you do every day and where your passion is. If there's any time that's allowed us to question this, it's now. And when we want to move forward and start making goals for the next year, make sure they're aligned with your purpose and your passion, that you're not waiting to be hit by lightning, that you're looking at all the things that you did get joy from. So if you got joy from certain things this year at maybe some of your hardest times, what are those things and why? Why did those things give you joy and passion? And that really can help you drive what your purpose is as you move forward into this next year. So I want to thank all of you for supporting this podcast and also the programs that we deliver at the B3 Method Institute. It's meant so much in order to really bring these messages to so many people. And I have so much gratitude for all of you that support us and follow us, and also share it with your friends and family as well when they need these messages too, and help in their personal lives. So much gratitude for all of you. For sticking with us, for listening to us, and hopefully benefiting from these messages in your lives and your businesses. And I look forward to seeing you and also communicating with you if I don't see you in person into the next year. Happy New Year. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.